Okay, let's start. Good morning or good evening to all, and welcome to the Data-Driven Community virtual meeting. As the name implies, one second, sorry, I have a technical issue now for some reason, and I know why. Okay, we will continue. My name is Ronen Arieli, and I'm honored to be here moderating this session today. A few words about the data-driven community in general. We are managing two branches of activities. The first one is a weekly meeting of the data-driven community user group, like today. The second branch of activity is an annual conference called Future Data-Driven Summit. Next week, on September 28th, we will have our user group meeting with Matt Gordon. He will discuss about using AI to make your data job easier. The Future Data-Driven Summit 2023 is just around the corner. It's also next week on September 27th. It's going to be much bigger than before. By the way, we have 5 tracks of parallel and 10 hours, over 50 speakers. And not to mention tens of swags, shirts, ebooks, gift card, and license for a top application. So you don't want to miss it. I will put the link in the chat if you did not register already.
Forget.
About 1 month after the Future Data-Driven Summit, the Past Data Summit 2023 will held on November in Seattle, while the Future Data-Driven is probably the biggest free virtual event for data platform. The Past Summit is probably the biggest physical event. I recommend to join the Future Data-Driven Summit next week and check your option to join Past Summit as well. Please use the chat during the session for questions and discussion. This is a user group, so we are more flexible. Use it not only to ask questions. If you have an answer or comment, feel free to use it. You also welcome to use reaction to show that you like something. For example, you can clap and you can mark a heart for love. This does not interfere the speaker. It's just a small icon that go on the screen for everyone. So use it freely. It's really look nice. Today we are hosting Marc Jellinek. Marc, you are welcome to share your screen now and take control. Maybe you can add some word about yourself as well.
Okay. Good morning. Good evening. I see people from all over the world. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to attend. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in user groups, SQL Pass, DataMosh, a lot of communities like LinkedIn and SQL Server Central. And I've learned an enormous amount from the community, and it just feels very good to be able to give back to the community. Yeah, I just want to introduce myself. Who is John Q. Public? What is the Asylum? And who am I? John Q. Public is my company. I've been an I've been a consultant on and off for most of my life, but I've always worked for other companies. I've worked for Microsoft or Ernst and Young, or I worked for most of Wall Street in New York, and it's taken me all over the world. It's been just an amazing, amazing experience. And throughout the course of my career, I've met amazing people. I love being the dumbest person in the room, and very often I am. And it's just a blessing. So being able to pull together these groups of independent people who are among the best in the world is where the asylum comes from. We are crazy people and we do crazy things. We do things that are basically impossible, and yet we seem to be able to do them pretty reliably. What I'm going to do is go through some of the successes and some of the basics. This is not comprehensive. It is not, you're not going to build an entire career off of this one presentation, but maybe I can help in some small way. So, John Q. Public, I was a little baby nerd before the internet even came. I was very active on dial-up bulletin board systems, and I still remember the wars about, is Wildcat better than Maximus or RBBS or what have you. I mean, I remember the wars about, is it OS2 Warp or Win.31? Ah, God, Linux. I love Linux. I love the communities and the passion and the engagement. So on all of these communities, on the internet, on Usenet, I always used the name John Q. Public. And when we talk about the asylum, it is pulling together this collection of independent entities. And just because I have a little grandiosity, I like to think that we are cooperating for the benefit of mankind. And one thing I can tell you is, having been all over the world, it really does represent the greatest talent I've ever seen. I love, love, love being the dumbest person in the room. So who am I? I'm a tech leader. Everybody's a tech leader. That's great. But what I mainly am is a student. I'm always trying to learn something. In technology throughout my career, when my career started, the product cycles were 3 to 5 years. Now they're more like 3 to 5 weeks. So you have to be able to learn, you have to know how you learn. And I've found some ways that work for me. I like engagement. I like sitting in front of my laptop or my computer and having a full keyboard ahead of me, but I also enjoy podcasts on my phone or iPad or Kindle or whatever device I happen to have nearby. I've been amazing. I could not have possibly planned my career. I just couldn't have. I've moved from company to opportunity to opportunity. And sometimes I went after it. And, I just still remember the day when I got a call from Microsoft. Would you like to interview with Microsoft? And I wanted to kind of play it cool and, oh, yes, that would be delightful. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to interview for Microsoft. Yes, that would be wonderful. And I remember the recruiter, Jana Strickland, who called me in, and she was just instantly like, okay, we're gonna make that happen. And that's just kind of, I guess, what I'm known for, is just making stuff happen. Some of the things that I've been involved with where stuff happened is at General Electric, in the United States, Major League Baseball. It's sometimes considered the national sport, sometimes not. And New York City Health and Hospitals, which is the largest metropolitan healthcare system in the United States. In the United States, we're not like Europe or many other places in the world where you have health care that is provided as a benefit of government. Our healthcare system's a little weird. Sometimes I have to explain it to people that weren't born here. But New York City Health and Hospitals is, if you bump your head and you're in New York City, you go to a New York City Health and Hospitals. That's the public healthcare system. and everybody is their customer. General Electric success was really about optimizing procurement. So we know we're going to order stuff, and GE is a huge global company. And I got involved in a project that was being run by someone else. It was actually a person on this call, Marie Clark, and she was working with a gentleman by the name of Konstantin Korobkov. And Konstantin got a good idea. He's like, okay, we need this answer, but we're having trouble getting it. So maybe I'll innovate and just try something else. And as a result of that, there was about probably $250,000 of investment. And this was back in like the Y2K time frame. So, maybe the equivalent of $400,000 now. But the return on investment came the same fiscal year. So in the same fiscal year, $250,000 came out. There were millions of dollars of benefit. I mean, the way that I think about that, they weren't paying us, we were paying them. And, the way the system was built was that it would continue to produce return on investment. It would continue to produce positive benefit that would grow over time. It wasn't just a one hit, in having a ability to create additional benefit over time. I believe that's the right way to do things. And the keys to pardon, the keys to success of that project really were about a willingness to experiment, try something. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Don't spend a lot of money in case you fail. Give it a nice constrained success criteria. And then if that's successful, just continue to build. And as you build and you scale a successful experiment, you can pretty reliably build value and continue to return value to the customer. And, really, I guess what this came down to was applying the appropriate technology to the appropriate problem. They had an embedded system which was very capable. It did everything it was supposed to do. But as soon as it wanted to do something that wasn't immediately in the use case, well, then it just became very, very expensive. And by using the right tool against the right problem, we were able to, and actually it wasn't even me, I just kind of guided, I tried to add value. But Marie Clark, who is on the call, I wish Constantine was able to make it, can speak more about that. Major League Baseball Network was big fun. Oh my God. Now what's funny is I don't like sports. It's just not my thing. I'm a nerd. I like to read. I like comic books. I like movies. And I'm not really into sports. So my friends were like, "Oh, working in Major League Baseball," and I'm just like, "Yeah, it's just data. It's a job. It's just data." And what they did is Major League Baseball decided, well, we're going to go on television. So instead of licensing out the content to Disney or Comcast or the large media companies in the United States, they made some very, very smart decisions. They said, well, we're going to do cable and satellite distribution instead of going over the air. They're going to do things like hire Bob Costas, who's one of the best sports commentators in history. Their attitude was, we're not going to end arguments, we're going to start them and get that enormous immediate audience engagement. And my role there was I'm a database nerd. So, little things like broadcast operations, or one of the ones that was very, very important was referred to as a traffic system. And this is how they insert and schedule commercials in between commercial breaks. And if you ever notice the little line on the bottom of the screen, the crawler, or they have a little icon down here, they refer to that as a bug. And I got to learn a lot. I not only learned a lot about baseball, but I learned about broadcast and media and advertising. And I'm a student. I just enjoy learning things. I didn't have a lot of time to learn stuff. I got there in November and they were going on air in January. So the first thing I needed to do was make sure we had a stable foundation upon which to build. And I had to do it quickly. And, it wasn't a lot. It was like 8 servers, dev, prod, test, backup, all the basic operational stuff that you have to do when people are relying on you to provide the data. And I was the only one. There was no backup. Um, I wound up training back up and doing that, but that was kind of sort of me. And I needed to be able to scale because, sometimes they don't share plans. Sometimes they just walk up to your desk and go, by the way, we just had 2,000 servers delivered in the broadcast media center. Can you do that? And they did that. And what I did was, they didn't have budget for things like solar winds or BMC patrol or any of the things that will help you manage large numbers of instances. So I kind of had to write it, what are the basics that I needed to take care of? Well, I needed to pull in all of the error logs from the databases. I needed to be able to pull in the event logs from the operating systems that hosted the database instances. I had to pull in data from the hypervisor that allowed, multiple virtual servers to cohabitate on a single set of hardware. And I had to do it fast, and I had to do it cheap, and I had to do it with whatever I had laying around. And one of the things we had laying around was Microsoft Access, which it just holds a special place in my heart. I did my first Windows programming on Microsoft Access. And I'm like, wow, I can build Windows apps. And wow, I can, this is easy. And, I've spent time doing enormous data projects, data warehouses, data marts. And, sometimes people look down on Microsoft Access, but it did the job. It did the job really well. And I was able to evolve the product to say, well, I want to know if my backups happened. Did my backups happen? I expect my backups to happen, and I expect the backups to be validated. So did that happen? And I'm going to pull that directly out of the logs. And then things like, did maintenance jobs happen? Were they successful? Did they fail? And, you build a cute little dashboard with the little red and green lights. And I liked being able to click a button and pull in all the logs, and the logic to do the matching was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. And then I've got a row of green dots, and we put it up on a television on the wall. And if anybody ever asked, is there anything wrong? We would just point to the television and everything is green. So if there's a specific problem, let me know and we'll look into it. But all the basics are being done. And then they did deliver another 2,000 servers. The video ingest server farm was 4 rows in a data center. And they're like, can you do this like tomorrow? And I'm like, oh, actually, I can. I mean, the way I built it, it was all data driven. So I just needed to put a couple of extra rows and a couple of extra tables. And I was ready before the servers were racked and stacked. And, and then instead of having 8 little green lights, I had over 2,000 little green lights. And it was really kind of nice. The head of IT and head of engineering was the same guy, and he'd just walk by and he'd give me the thumbs up or thumbs down. Is everything all right? And I would just point to the wall and he'd go, okay. And that was about the length of my interaction. One of the things that we did wind up doing is doing a full-blown statistics system for Major League Baseball. And baseball fans are in love with their statistics. And the right tools at the right place at the right time, giving the right information to the right consumers really became it was a great project. It was a lot of fun. I worked on that with a consultant from Microsoft Consulting Services named Jamie Fox, and we got to do some really, really cool things. Like Bob Costas would be hanging out, and Hank Aaron did an interview, and Hank Aaron is a legend in American baseball. It was, Jamie was a sports guy, and he's like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I had to think on my feet. I had to be willing to do a little extra. I was not hired as a programmer. I was hired as an infrastructure engineer, but I was willing to go the extra mile. I was willing to think about things from a finance perspective. Like I could say, listen, we need $1 million tool and it's going to take 8 years to implement, or I can build only specifically what I need, fast, dirty, cheap. And I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just did it. It needed to be done. And I was willing to apologize rather than ask permission. And honestly, the only people that know about this are me and Jamie and a couple of other people. There's really no glory associated with any of this, but it is work that I'm proud of, and I enjoyed doing it. New York City Health and Hospitals runs the hospital systems in New York. There are private hospital systems and public. And public is taxpayer funded and run by the city, which means it's run by politicians. Do I really need to say anything more than that? And I was very surprised when I got there because I've done public projects before, and they tend to be very heavy on administration and very heavy on politics and personalities. And the gentleman I worked for was Alex Izagari. He was the chief data officer, and he figured his mission was to teach doctors how to use data and how to consume it and what it means, and being able to leverage the enormous, enormous taxpayer funded investments in information technology. And everywhere you go in a doctor's office, there's a glowing screen and a keyboard, or maybe there's just the glowing screen, but they are heavily, heavily reliant on data in order to maintain their staffing levels. I did a gig in northern New Jersey where we brought the local hospital systems into the 21st century, and we ran cable and fiber and racked servers and routers and switches and hubs and blah, 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 all the stuff you got to do. But at that time, they had one nurse for every 5 patients because they would still have a paper chart in a drawer at the end of the bed, and whoever walked by could pick it up and flip through it. I mean, there was absolutely no data privacy, and there was no data validation because anybody could write anything on that piece of paper. But it was what it was. Now, the ratio of nurses to patients is more like 1 to 20 because they need that data in order to maintain their staffing levels, in order to keep costs low, in order to drive efficiency and scalability. So when you collect all this data, collecting data and sticking it in a drawer is kind of like what I do with my bills. I open it up and I throw it in a box and it stays there forever. And my accountant hates me because there's no order to it. When it comes time to do my quarterly books or my annual books, he just, couldn't you put this into a spreadsheet? I'm like, no, it's more fun to make you nuts. But you don't have that option when you're a nurse. You don't have that option when you're a doctor. And being able to teach medical practitioners across the spectrum how to leverage that data results in better outcomes. So, one of those better outcomes was doctors were spending less time flipping through stuff because they could consume the data visually, which is much more effective as a communication path. And by having that extra time available, they were available to do higher quality, higher value work. And it saved the taxpayers of the city of New York about $1 billion. A billion with a B. And even more than the money, it increased the quality of care, which is really what I'm about. I want to create those positive outcomes. If my grandmother goes to the hospital, I want her to have the best possible care. If my daughter goes to the hospital, I want her to have the best possible care. And I think as a result of this application and this experience, somebody's grandmother had a better experience. Somebody's kid had a better outcome. But our keys to success really were executive sponsorship. Without Alex Izaguirre driving this effort, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. It just would have been another stupid little reporting project. We've all done them. We're going to build a dozen reports that no one's ever going to read. And, no, that didn't happen. He was driving this relentlessly. And we had a very small, very focused team of highly experienced people who thought out of the box. It's what if we do this and what if we do that? And let's try something small. And then if it works, roll it out to everybody and teach them and leverage assets like people's cell phones. So, a lot of people in New York commute by bus or commute by subway, and they all have a device. I mean, you walk onto a subway in New York City, and all you see are people doing this. So they made training material available to people in a way that they could easily consume. And riding on the train is kind of boring, so it's nice to have something to do. And we had that clear partnership, that clear bridge between technologists and medical practitioners. There was a lot of interactive discussion. What do you need? What do you notice? What triggers your attention? What will draw your attention to an issue that requires immediate intervention? And, just doing the little things like that increased the quality of care, and it did drive down costs. That's work I believe is worth doing. How did we do this? What is the common thread among the projects that I do and these projects in particular? Well, the first thing is you got to do the basics. Any house, no matter how well built, will fall if it's on a bad foundation. If you buy property in the United States, in Florida, get sinkhole protection. If you live in the hurricane track on the East Coast, get flood insurance. And I hope your house is built to code, because if not, you're going to die. Not only are you going to die, your family's going to die, and you're going to lose your house and everything you've ever worked for. So having that strong foundation, it's not a nice to have. It is required. It is required. And if you're not on a firm foundation, then you're going to fall. And what is that foundation based on? There's a lot of foundational concepts in data and in IT and in systems and in medicine and in everything. And if you never leave the basics, you never have to go back to the basics. So the basics that I've really learned about and been a student of are data models, security, auditing, monitoring, and data governance. And I love debates. I love debates. I love arguing. I love conflict. I find conflict to be very constructive. And I like to win arguments, which means I like to know what the heck I'm talking about. And being a student, sometimes people are like, well, what's better, Inman or Kimball? Do I want third normal form or do I want data mesh? It doesn't matter. They're all good at something. And knowing what they're good at allows you to apply the proper tools to solve the problems. I'm not an innovator. I wish I were. I'm just not that smart. But what I know is for an OLTP system, online transaction processing, there are benefits. Your bottom line is third normal form or Boyce Cod. And none of this is new. I mean, all of this was written in the late 1960s, early 1970s. But I also know that there's additional benefit to using fifth normal form. And if you don't know the difference, that's okay. You can read a book. I remember when I was learning, I had to sit in a library or sit in a bookstore. And now I read on my phone and my Kindle. And I actually do have paper books because, I'm kind of old school. But having that availability of information is just mind-blowing to me. The fact that I can go on to Google and type in a random question and usually get a good answer within the first 3 pages, to me is like living in the Star Trek universe of my youth. Computer, please tell me what is third normal form. It's fun. It's amazing. And as I've grown in my career from reporting and online transaction processing into data marts and into data warehouses, you get into Kimball and you get into Inman. And if you're doing data warehouse work and you don't know these names, I don't know what you're doing, but it ain't data warehouse work. I've gone into clients where they're like, we have a data warehouse. I'm like, you have 10,000 undocumented Excel spreadsheets. That's not a data warehouse. That's called a spread mart. And they're like, no, 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 no. I'm like, yeah, I don't even tell them anymore. I just shut up. That's why I no longer have hair and frustration issues. But now we also have new architectures that are taking advantage of scale wide, massive parallel processing, data lakes, lake houses, near shore, long shore. I don't need, marketing just keeps on coming up with weird names. But as far as I'm concerned, it is raw data. And, people say data is the new oil. Yeah, they don't get it. They don't get it. That came out of marketing. Data is the new fire. Okay. It is a fundamental technology upon which benefit can be built. And if you don't get that, that's okay. Go sell cars, go do something else, but you're not doing this. So the basics of security, I love data marts. I do. I love data warehouses. I love data lakes. Let's put all of our information in one place and then give everybody access to it. Is there any security concern there? The way I convince people to put security in place is I just print out the C-suite's compensation package. This is how much you earned last year according to the data that's in the data lake. And I present that to the C-suite. And immediately, all of a sudden, security is a priority. There's a data breach in the news almost every day. They are no longer paying attention. What they do is they say, well, monitor your credit report. We don't care if your identity is stolen. We're going to pay for monitoring for 1 year, and after that, it's your problem. No, I don't want to do business like that. That's not me. So the basics are security. If you don't have security, you are in danger of a breach. End of story. If you want your application to wind up on the front page of Der Spiegel or the New York Times or the front page of Google, don't include any security. It'll only be a matter of time before you're hacked. Auditing, basics. I love it when I go, where did this data come from? And I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't feel foolish at all. Well, how do you not know where the data come from? Well, it was never written. It's not logged. There's no auditing. What person made the decision that auditing was too expensive? Go talk to them. I don't have the data. I'm not going to make it up. I can do some extraordinary things with router logs and switch logs and, but it's no longer a lookup. It becomes a forensics effort. And forensics is a lot harder than writing a SQL query. Hey, buddy, this is the mush. Give me the kiss. Thank you. She won't give me a kiss. Who put it there? Who put it there? I don't know. I don't know. And I mean, these are basic things. You basically need 6 columns in every table. Who wrote it? When was it first written? When was it last written? Who updated it? When was it last updated? You're done. I mean, you have basic auditing, but it's more than most systems will ever see. So when people come to me and ask me a question, who changed this data? I like to have an answer because I don't like looking foolish. I just don't enjoy it. And I don't like having to explain to people that the reason we don't have these answers is because an executive made a decision. Executives don't like that either. Monitoring. Well, if you have a ton of data, but nobody can get to it, you have an expensive hobby. You're not being a professional. You're just not. You have a lot of bits on a lot of platters, or you've got a lot of data on SSD, but if it ain't available, well, no one's going to benefit from it. These are just the basics. If you have the basics in place, you can build a palace. And if you don't have a foundation, that palace will very, very quickly become a shack. It'll become a big pile of twisted metal. And the best thing you can hope for is nobody dies. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Data governance. Oh, I don't know why, but programmers don't like to type. For some reason, I like long descriptive names, and for some reason, they think we're still on DOS 3.3 because they won't use a table name longer than 8 characters. Oh, and my favorite is SAP data. That's a lot of fun, or JD Edwards. The tables are completely non-descriptive. So what do you have to do? Well, you need a data dictionary. What information does this table contain? What column is used to look up a specific piece of information? And if you don't have a data dictionary, guess who gets the blame? You. You will take the blame because somebody else didn't do the work. Good decisions cannot be made on bad data. So if you're not paying attention to data quality, you have no idea the quality of your decisions or the actions that you're taking. So I don't like being in a position where I need to make decisions with data I don't trust. And I don't think anybody else does either. I think we all really want to do a good job and create the benefits that technology can deliver. Master data. So my name is Marc Jellinek. I'm of Eastern European descent. So when I'm in Eastern Europe, they keep on trying to spell my name with one L. And if I'm in the Netherlands, they don't pronounce it Jellinek, they pronounce it Jelinek. And if I'm in a Spanish-speaking country, the double L is a different sound than it is in English. So I have to deal with, well, if Marc Jellinek and Mark with a K Jellinek and Marc D Jellinek are all individual rows in my customer table, well, now instead of being one customer, which is what I am, now all of a sudden the system thinks I'm 3 different customers. And this is a very, very basic master data and data governance question, and it leads to bad decisions. If I'm doing an ad campaign for 300,000 or 300 million, well, it's a lot more expensive than doing it for 100 million. And all of these decisions have a dollar cost impact. And then data lineage, which is really just more auditing. Where did the data come from? What was the source system? What was it processed by? What version? I love it when data lands in a staging table and I have no idea where it came from. Where did this come from? I don't know. Well, the data's bad, so we need to go upstream. How do we fix it? Well, we can't. Now we need a forensics effort. Now we need investigation. Now we need highly qualified people who are very, very expensive rather than just running a data lineage report. So small changes in technology have big, big, big impacts. Now, here's where I look at this from a consulting perspective. I do a bit of personal branding because that's how I sell myself. I sell my services for money. That's how I make my living. That's my deal. Um, if you can't trust the data, can you trust the data team? Ooh, ooh. Has anybody ever been fired because an executive made a bad decision? Because I have. I have. I don't like it, and I don't want it to happen to you. Because if you can't trust the team, who's to blame? Is it the manager of the team? Is it the executives? Is it people making the policies that present or prevent quality work from being done? There's a big change happening within our industry, and we are the keepers of the flame. Data is the new fire. And there's a whole lot less of us than they have jobs. I mean, according to the United States federal government Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1/3 of IT jobs are unfilled. We are the rare commodity. We are the rare commodity, and rare commodities are valuable. And, if a customer works with me and they will not allow me to do quality work, I don't argue with them. I just leave. We're done. Thank you. I would very much like to deliver and give you the best of myself. But if you're going to prevent that, then there's no reason for me to be here. I'm just a very expensive resource who's distracting you. I don't want to distract you. I want to aid in your mission. And let's see. Well, I don't know why this is not updating, but we have opportunities. We have enormous personal opportunities, and we have enormous professional opportunities, and we have opportunities to create enormous, enormous benefits. Not only cash dollar benefits like what happened at General Electric, but real life benefits like enhancing someone's enjoyment of sports or taking better care of grandma when she winds up in the hospital. So, I like to ask people questions like, why would you choose to suck? Why would you set yourself up for failure when it's so easy to set yourself up for success? Recommendations. I'm very direct. I'm a New Yorker. I live in New Jersey. There is no passive in my aggressive. It's just kind of who I am. One of the things that is one of my key failures is I fail to persuade. So learn to persuade. Learn to tell people above your pay grade that there's potentially a better way, a simpler way, a cheaper way, a more beneficial way. And executives like revenue. So if you can tell them we'll generate more revenue or we'll spend less money, they don't care about third normal form, Kimball, data lake. They don't care. They don't know about it. They don't have the education for it, but they do care about revenue. Automate everything, everything. If I do it once, I document it because it's a one-off. But if I do it twice, I automate it. Because if it's going to be done twice, it's going to be done a third time, and it may as well be done fast, cheap, consistently, and documented. Source control. Rolling forward is great. Rolling back is better. If I deploy something out to production and it does something I don't expect it to do, I damn well better be able to put it back, especially if I'm working in a hospital system or a trauma center or anything that's even remotely important. Maybe it's not that important for a Chinese restaurant menu, but when billions of dollars are at stake, that's people's livelihood. That's their jobs. So back up before you mess up is one of the Post-it notes that always lives on top of my monitor. And don't let them get into your head. Don't, don't. There's enough stress in this job. There's enough stress in our world where you're going to have to learn to not let them into your head. You may have to say, like, executive, I'm sorry, you may not get your bonus this quarter, but you're going to get a much larger bonus second quarter, and help them to focus on things that are important to them. How do I focus people? Well, why guarantee a project's going to fail? Like, it's great that you landed 100 head count and a $25 million budget. Congratulations. But why would you cap that off with a guaranteed failure? That just doesn't make sense. People work with data. I work with data. I don't work with data. I weaponize data. It is a very sharp blade, and it'll cut you. It'll cut you, and you better be careful with it. But you know, it really to me is the new fire. So why plan to suck? How much time and money do you want me to waste? Or should I just, wing it? If you want me to wing it, well, I'll walk, but I'll tell them that, we don't need to wing it. We need to plan our work and we need to work our plan. Every presentation ends with a call to action. So if I'm saying things that remind you of where you work, call me. I'll fix it. I am not afraid to tell your boss they're doing it wrong. I'm not. And if they listen, great. And if they don't, get another job. There's so many jobs out there right now that you have no reason to work for knuckleheads. Don't put your livelihood and your family's livelihood at risk because some executive wants to get a trivial bonus. I've got my email, I've got my contact information, and I've got the websites. And please let me know how I can help you create positive outcomes using data. And thank you very much for your time. Listen, it's lunchtime on the East Coast in the United States, but it's 6 o'clock in Central Europe. It's about dinner time. In Asia, it's like, oh, dark early. And I admire you for continuing to invest in your education. And I hope I haven't wasted your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mark, and thanks everyone who joined us today. I want to remind you, don't forget to join us next week at the Future Data Driven Summit. You have the link in the chat. You can join us if you didn't register yet. This is the time. So if there are questions, you can still use the chat.
Make me call on you.
Yeah, we call on you to call us. Call Marks
All right.
with some question if you have. If not, we will meet you next week in the Future Data Driven and in the user group meeting one day after it. Okay.
Everybody's eating lunch. It's all
Yep.
good. No, I did the same thing. You put it on mute, you listen to it on your headset, you're eating lunch, you're catching up on email. It's
People
all
are
good, but
active
this
here
is,
always. That's okay.
pardon?
I'm saying that that's people are active here always. That's okay. They are using the break time in order to participate in the user group, and then they can go to the boss and say, "Hey, we didn't have a break time," so they can take another break time.
Right.
Anyway, thanks a lot. We will close the meeting as we come to the end. See you all. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.